On June 15, 2022, about 0400 local time, the towing vessel Karen Kobe was towing the crane barge Ambition when the barge capsized and sank in the Gulf of Mexico, about 48 miles southeast of Cameron, Louisiana. There were no persons on the barge, and none of the Karen Kobe's 4 crew were injured. The Ambition was partly submerged in about 54 feet of water, where it was later salvaged. The sunken barge released an estimated 1,980 gallons of oil. The Ambition and its crane were determined to be a total loss, with damages estimated at $6.3 million. The 94.4-foot-long, twin-engine, twin-screw, inspected towing vessel Karen Kobe, owned and operated by LA Terriers, was constructed of welded steel. The 195-foot-long by 70-foot-wide uninspected crane barge, Ambition, was constructed of welded steel, with 2 spuds on the port side. It had a depth of 10.5 feet, a raked bow, and a square stern. Owned by Rigid Constructors, the barge was purpose-built by Diamond B Industries of New Iberia, Louisiana, to accommodate a crane by welding together 2 existing deck barges and was delivered to Rigid Constructors in June 2020. The port barge was constructed in 1995, and the starboard barge was constructed in 1998. Each of the barges, purchased by Rigid in March and April 2020. Before the casualty, the Ambition was spudded down at the Duval Fleet on the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway near Sulphur, Louisiana, where it had been in a non-working status for about 4 to 5 weeks. Rigid Constructors requested Patriot Marine Services provide towage services for the Ambition. Patriot in turn requested LA Terriers to provide towage services for the Ambition. The tug Karen Kobe was assigned to begin the job starting on June 14th. Due to the height of the crane, the Ambition could not be towed through the Intercoastal Waterway and had to be towed down the Calcasieu River and offshore in the Gulf of Mexico to reach its destination on the Mississippi River. At 0940 on June 14th, the Karen Kobe arrived at the Ambition. The crew consisted of a captain, a mate, and 2 deckhands. A Rigid Constructors crew of 5, sent to the Ambition to secure everything for its transit, arrived shortly after. About 10:20, the Karen Kobe got underway with the Ambition on its starboard hip for the 19-mile trip down the Calcasieu River to a fuel facility at the mouth of the river. While underway, the Rigid crew said they secured all items on the deck of the Ambition using ratchet straps. About 16:10, the Karen Kobe and the Ambition arrived at the fuel facility and tied off. One of the Rigid crew members began refueling the fuel tank on the barge's deck. The Rigid supervisor, noting that the stern of the barge was higher out of the water than the bow, instructed one of the Rigid crew members to add fresh water from the fuel facility to the aftermost compartments, the 2 stern voids, of the port and starboard barges to get the barge level. The supervisor told investigators that 8,000 gallons of fresh water were added to those compartments and 1,800 gallons of diesel oil were added to the fuel tank on the deck of the Ambition. Once the refueling and ballasting was complete, the Rigid crew departed. At the fuel facility, the captain of the Karen Kobe completed the company's voyage risk assessment checklist, reviewing the forecasted winds and seas and the route, current, water depth, air clearances, and tug and barge running lights. He noted that the forecast was for good weather with light winds and 2 to 3 foot seas. Meanwhile, the deckhand on watch carried out LA Terrier's barge inspection for the Ambition. On the inspection form, he reported visible hull damage. He observed a 1 by 2 inch rust hole in the deck on the port barge near the stern. He also noted that hatch cover gaskets were not in place, nor were they in good condition, and not all hatch cover lids were physically locked down. The deckhand reported the 2 missing hatch covers to the captain of the Karen Kobe, who, in turn, called the Rigid supervisor. At 16:56, the supervisor called the Rigid crew back, and one of them went on the barge to locate and set the hatch covers in place. The Karen Kobe deckhand on watch told investigators that a Rigid crew member placed a portable dewatering pump over the top of an open hatch for the rake void on the port barge at the forwardmost port corner of the Ambition. A rigid crew member told investigators that he could not find the hatch covers, so he put a big plate of metal on top of the aftermost hatch on the port side of the Ambition. The captain of the Karen Kobe told investigators that, during his last communication with the rigid supervisor, he was told that the Ambition was secured and ready to depart with no restrictions. About 17:30, the Karen Kobe got underway with the Ambition in tow. About 3:30 am, the mate noticed on the electronic chart system that the speed of the Karen Kobe had dropped from about 5.2 knots to about 4.5 knots. He told investigators that, although there was no other indication of a problem, the reduction in speed caught him by surprise since he had not made any changes to the engine. RPM, which the captain recalled was about 1,050 RPM on each engine, and the winds and seas were still the same. He asked the deckhand to stand by in the wheelhouse so that he could check on the tow. He tried to use the spotlight on top of the wheelhouse, but he couldn't see much of the barge. The mate then woke up the captain. At 3:32 am, Automatic Identification System, AIS, data showed the Karen Kobe was making a speed of 4 knots. The captain and mate went to the wheelhouse and looked at the Ambition with a spotlight. The captain said he couldn't see anything at that time. At 3:39 am, the Karen Kobe's speed dropped to 3 knots. The Karen Kobe was still in autopilot mode with no changes to the engine RPM. About 4 am, the mate saw the Ambition capsize, with the port corner of the bow dipping down before rolling over quickly to port. The on-watch deckhand saw water on the deck of the port barge up to the forward spud and noted that he could not see the port side running light located on the barge's forward port corner. The Ambition partially sank in about 54 feet of water, with its port bow embedded in the sand and its starboard quarter protruding out of the water. After, the crew of the Karen Kobe reeled in as much tow line as possible to within about 100 feet of the partially sunken barge, and they cut the cable. Post-casualty examination of the port barge found a 25-foot-long separation along the weld seam between the bottom plate and bilge knuckle plate, with both plates exhibiting severely wasted steel. Investigators also found severe deterioration and steel wastage at the bottom of the centerline watertight longitudinal bulkhead. The barges that made up the Ambition were 27 and 24 years old and had been in service before being welded together in 2020 to create a deck barge that could hold the crane. Rigid constructors had no plans to carry out a permanent repair to the section of the hull where the temporary repair had been made to contain apparent water ingress between the floor and bilge knuckle plates. Further, there were no structural hull inspections or maintenance carried out on the Ambition other than on an as-needed basis. Rigid constructors failed to conduct permanent repairs in an area critical to hull strength. During the tow in the Gulf of Mexico, the Ambition had at least 6 hatch covers that were either missing or not properly secured. Although a Karen Kobe deckhand notified the captain of 2 missing covers, the captain did not notify the LA carriers office of any of the items noted in the barge inspection report. The initial hull failure at the knuckle and subsequent progressive flooding would have caused the Ambition to heel to port and ride further down by the bow. This is supported by both the on-watch mates and deckhands' observations of how the barge rolled over. This was not the first time LA Carriers has lost a barge offshore. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of the capsizing and sinking of the crane barge Ambition was the barge owner's lack of hull inspection and maintenance, and not conducting permanent repairs, which resulted in the failure of the hull and subsequent flooding. Contributing was likely down flooding through an open deck hatch due to the tow operator's failure to ensure adherence to its procedures for barge watertight integrity before getting underway, despite being aware of deficiencies with the watertight integrity of the barge.